We often look up to the stars for answers, but we are suggesting you might look down for a change. We are handing you a terrestrial telescope and inviting you to go ground gazing with us. What do you see? Cropped plants, ink spots of water, open mounds of tufted earth. Dive deeper, there is a world beneath. A festival of exchange, a body that brings balance. Peatlands are rich constellations where we can discover ancient histories, cultural heritage, and essential ecosystems. Their wisdom can help us to learn more about the world we live in and how to make it a better place together. In this episode, the sun beats down, hitting the ground with a primal drum that strikes a rhythm for nature's humming song. 365 beats per year, rolling together, and each beat contains an explosive song. The thump of a moment, filled with its own dance. It's an inheritance that we sense and spread, as stories that contain seeds of understanding that are fertilised through generations. In this episode, we will explore the way that stories, songs, and celebration can connect us to our land. We will hear some of the folk traditions that celebrate our ancient relationships with the rhythms of the world.
One, two, three, four.
Deep in the fen are tigers asleep, with thatch overhead and clay underneath. Rushes dance freely and poplar trees hum, but the water it knows just what has been done. Deep in the fen are tigers asleep, with thatch overhead and clay underneath. Rushes dance freely and poplar trees hum, but the water it knows just what has been done. Deep in the fen are tigers asleep, with thatch overhead and clay underneath. Rushes dance freely and poplar trees hum, but the water it knows.
How, we observe the world around us, we observe those little roots, and people have been doing that for hundreds of years, and we see the mists on the moor, whatever it might be, and stories are a kind of way of really explaining what we see in some sense.
But it's the giants around Dartmoor that I think they would either play with each other or compete with each other, and would throw giant boulders and rocks, and they would land.
So where they landed was
the tor. Yeah.
Oh. We've got stories to tell.
We call on the desert to remember when she was the bottom of the sea. We call on the volcanoes to inject us with the flames of imagination. I've journeyed distant lands and bygone times, across shores where signs were written in the sand. I searched to find the magic in the stars, and I landed back where I began.
People connect with the land through stories, and that's why stories and folklore are so very, very important and relevant here and now for, activism, for conservation, and for just building that relationship, the invaluable relationship between people and the land.
What have you been spying, Paula?
So I have been spying for my pixie, and I found them hidden amongst the long grass. And the first thing they told me to do was to stop and listen. So then I spent some time listening to all the birdsong, which was beautiful.
That's magic.
Tell us of all the things that we've forgotten. We are not afraid of boys. Tell us of all the ones that we have lost. We are not afraid to remember those. Tell us of all the stories been erased. We are not afraid of time. Tell us of what we once were. We are not afraid of ourselves. Tell us of all the things that we forgot. We are not afraid of bones. Tell us of all the ones that we have lost. We are not afraid to remember those. Tell us of all the stories been erased. We are not afraid of time. Tell us of who or what we once were. We are not afraid of ourselves.
I love working with lots of different specialists because there's sort of different languages, aren't there? And lots of the researchers I used to work with at Exeter University, you know, they would tell me about all the very complex work they were doing with gases and things, and thinking about what gases were being taken in and what was coming out. And you get these lovely senses of things like the bog breathing, this lovely slow breath of a bog through time.
Peat is a rich, dark shelter for objects from the past. It grows slowly. Just 1 millimetre of new peat is formed every year when a peatland is healthy, meaning 1 metre of peat, like that in the picture on the slide, can tell 1,000 years of stories.
You told us lots about some of the sort of myths and legends that are associated with this part of the country. Could you tell me some of those now?
Yeah. I mean, I think when you've got any piece of moorland or water or anything like that, you've got legends growing up around it. And Bobbin Moor is full of tor stacks, so there's lots of legends to do with giants throwing stones at each other around that. There's also legends of on Stows Hill, one prominent hill in St Cleer Parish and Lincolnhorn Parish, that's got the cheese ring on top of it, and that was supposedly built by giants. But also there's another legend which runs off the back of that about a druid that lived there that had a cup that you couldn't drink dry, and some huntsman challenged someone to go and try and drink it dry, and he couldn't, and he rode off with it, and his horse fell over and he died, and his horse was buried. And this is related to the gold cup that was found very close to the cheese ring. So that wasn't found until 1838. So that's a legend which has grown up since. And we've been today to Dosmary Pool, which is which would probably be called a lake, but it's called the pool. And there's a legend there of the Lady of the Lake. So King Arthur Excalibur was thrown in there after he died, and also the Tregeagle legend, which is Tregeagle was I think he was a land agent, and he sold his soul to the devil, and what he had to do, he had a series of challenges, and one of them was to bail the pool out using a limpet with a hole in it.
Clodfuls of peat, on this land where the sphagnum runs deep. To save our way, we mustn't obey, so the Tiddyman waters are free.
The lovely thing with collage is the way I start is to think about the sort of the colours and textures within a landscape, and both those that are visible on the surface and the ones that we see as archaeologists and ecologists down into the peat. So paint up lots of different paper. You can see on the left-hand side examples of that, and lots of different things together, and then just begin to cut them out and assemble them within a sort of rough plan of what I want to achieve. But very often the fantastic thing about collage is they sort of take on a life of their own, and as you're doing them, things move around, and I stick as I go along, so things get stuck, and then you think, I'm not sure that quite works, and you have to sort of react to it and create more, and you can layer up. And that's sort of how landscapes work, isn't it? They sort of, things are layering up, things are being put on top of each other. As one thing happens, it affects the balance or the way you see something else. And I think that's the lovely thing about making these. They're not just a finished picture. The making of them is part of the thinking process about all the kinds of things that we do. And then when you've done them, they sort of tell lots of different stories, or people might see them in lots of different ways.
history comes from stories, so it is his story, and I think stories really tie people to the landscape. And before people were writing things down, they were telling stories, and people love a good story, don't they?
There were two sisters, Edna and Enid, and they travelled over the moor telling stories to those who would listen. This time they were heading to Ivy Bridge, where they would tell tales at the watermark and parks across the town. As they walked over Butterden Hill, the mist rolled in, and the storm clouds gathered overhead. Even though they were close to Ivy Bridge, they decided to stop at a pond called Blackpool. As it started getting darker, the sisters decided to light a fire. The gorse and grasses were wet and would not burn, so the sisters decided to dig up some peat and burn it instead, as the gases in it burnt easily. A sudden flash of lightning split the sky above them, and not a second later, thunder shook the earth and the rain started falling. The sisters covered their excavated peat with their umbrella whilst trying to light it, but even then the peat wouldn't stay alight with more than a few seconds before going out. The sisters were confused about this when a sound came from behind them. A human hand reached out of the peat. Then another hand groped and grabbed a clump of reeds. With this new handhold it pulled. First came its forearms and elbows, then you could see its shoulder. Then a helmeted head came from behind, and its eyes pure white orbs. And a mouth with shriveled lips. A low groan came from its mouth.
Respect the bog. Protect the bog. Help the bog.
I suppose something that's so invisible or elusive in the landscape, and yet so deep and full of stories, as Jane was just saying, it's got this real richness to it and so many things that you can pick out of it, but it's very hard to sort of tune into that and begin to learn to see it or listen to the different voices there.
Peatlands are one of our most precious yet misunderstood habitats, deeply connected to human history over millennial timescales. They might be bogs, fens, swamps, wet woodlands, valley mires, but they are all wet places, or at least they should be. This wetness has been both a blessing and a curse for peatlands, providing them with the resilience to survive for thousands of years, but making them places that people want drier. No one wants to get bogged down or stuck in the mire, do they? The bog. Because of our past relationships of exploitation and extraction, around 80% of peatlands in the UK are damaged and degraded. The situation is even worse for some of our southwest peatlands, like Dartmoor, where only around 1% of the deep peat there is healthy. Peatlands have been deliberately drained so we can cut turf to warm our homes or make compost, so we can grow non-native trees like Norway or Sitka spruce for timber, so we can graze animals, extract stone, metals and minerals, so we can grow crops, put up wind turbines, or simply live and work on dry land in this small and densely populated nation.
I think in the past there were places that everyone kept away from because they were, they were places where you could lose yourself and lose animal.
Asks someone to go out onto the moors and have a look. And he comes to like a small cave thing, I think. And inside he sees the devil with other devils and witches. And they're singing a song, which is like, here comes the devil with his wooden pick and shovel.
Here comes the devil with his wooden pick and shovel.
By the nature of why we're here, this is a bog. And
sometimes the ground feels very firm underfoot 1 minute, and then you take a step the wrong direction, and before you know it, you're up to your shoulders deep in the peat and the water. And I've managed to do that more than once on this particular peat bog. Of course, if it's just you walking along, everyone has a good laugh and it's funny. We've worked on other peat bogs, particularly say up on the Somerset levels where the peat is much deeper. And when you've got big machines up on the peat, the minute one of them starts to break the crust and sink through, it's not so much funny as fairly terrifying as you're watching a 200,000 pound digger in a very sensitive bit of ground suddenly get into a whole lot of trouble. So yeah, when it's yourself getting soaked, it's funny. When it's a big machine going through, it's a whole nother ball game.
I think frightening stories can teach people to respect bogs, which is great, as they do pose real danger, and it's a good reminder that the world we live in is big and beyond our comprehension. But yeah, I think scary stories can also be harmful, as fear can lead to ignorance and mistreatment. People hurt the things they fear, like squashing a spider. So it can be good to be careful when we tell stories about peatlands and make sure they do invoke respect, but also curiosity, appreciation and joy.
Telling stories is the best way to capture people's attention, to move them so they feel an emotional connection to what's being said, or an empathy with the storyteller that makes them more likely to remember, to share the story, and to act. The folklore, myths and legends associated with peatlands are all stories that have been passed from one person to the next and have shaped our understanding and connection to these places. We all remember the terror of the Hound of the Baskervilles, or the desolation of the Swamp of Sadness in the Never-Ending Story. It's crucial that we tell stories now that help to reshape our relationship with peatlands, moving away from exploitation and fear towards appreciation and restoration.
Hey ho, anybody ho, me no ho, anybody ho. Yes, I will be very merry. Make no drink, no anybody ho. Yes, I will be very merry. Yes, I will be very merry. Yes, I will be very merry.
Bodmin Beast!
We always talk about the kind of the sort of the ecosystem services that peatlands sort of provide. Stores carbon, kind of they regulate the local climate. When with sort of on a hot day, you're always going to be a bit cooler when you're next to a peatland. They hold history. They regulate flooding, provide homes for biodiversity. But I think what I was trying to say as well, on top of all of that, I think we say it's a repeat often. On top of all of those lovely ecosystem services, they also provide fun times. Imagination. So I feel like when you go out on a peatland, you just sort of like your mind just kind of like oozes out.
So this one goes down in the where the stagnant grows, back to my home. I dare not go, for if I do, my friends will say, and it's a rhyming song. So then you go, have you ever seen a tardigrade looking at a fire brigade? Down in the peat, down in the peat, where the stagnant grows.
Did you learn anything new about peat or moss?
How kind of pretty moss is.
Yeah, it's nice. Like how old it is.
And does it make you want to take care of nature?
Yeah.
Oh. Do you want to have one message about peat or moss that you want to just say to the microphone?
Yeah. Do you want to start?
I feel like we need to protect it as much as we can and try and teach more people about it so then they will be inspired to protect it.
Yeah, I think it's good to like teach it in like a fun way because then it makes you want to do it again and like it's more inspirational than just like a talk, so it's good.
Growing sphagnum moss, a plant where peatlands have been damaged, illustrates really beautifully a reframed relationship with a plant that was once harvested from peatlands to dress soldiers' wounds, now being grown in culture and used to dress the wounds of our damaged peatlands.
We have reached the end of Stomping Ground, our 5th Bogcast episode. Thank you for coming ground gazing with us and discovering the wonderful world beneath. We look forward to seeing you next time for a Bogcast where we simmer down and think about our place in the world, the responsibility that brings, and how we can temper fear of the future with tangible actions and connections. Thank you to Jane Akerman from IUCN UK Peatland Programme and Rose Ferraby, artist and archaeologist, for their contributions to this episode. You heard an excerpt of Bog Body, a collaborative story created at our Shallowford Farm workshop and beautifully written up by Dartmoor Young Rangers Iona and Lowena. Thank you to Funky Fens for the singing you heard throughout the episode. We feel privileged to have been able to make this podcast with funding from the Heritage Lottery Fund. Special thanks to everyone who spoke to us and helped make this happen, to the Art and Energy Collective and RE-PEAT, to all the other wonderful organisations involved, including South West Peatland Partnership, Dorset Peatland Partnership, the Avalon Marshes Partnership, the National Trust, RSPB, Wildlife Trusts, Dartmoor and Exmoor National Parks, Planet Purbeck, Cornwall National Landscape Team, and thank you to Otis Jordan for the beautiful music you heard. And of course, to you for listening.